Beep beep.
We've all had villagers we hate, have we not? Whether it's a bad autofill, or it's a villager you thought you were fine with, but just grew to hate over time. I feel like a lot of us have had that experience in Animal Crossing games in general. But I have a question for y'all who are out here hating some villagers, I myself included. Given the choice, would you want to be able to get rid of a villager at will at any time? And would you want to be able to prevent villagers that you dislike from ever moving in at all? Would you want to just get rid of forced autofills entirely? Do you wish that you could vanquish the god of randomness and become the god yourself? Let me know what you think. To frame this in a more practical manner for myself, I'm asking myself right now, given the choice, would I move this villager I hate off my island right now? If I could, would I push him out? The villager that is coming to mind for me is Hippo. If you've been watching my streams, you know we've been on a whole journey with him. He's one of a very few select class of villagers that I said I would hate to have move onto my island, and guess who showed up on my campsite as my whatever 6th villager that you have to move in. You have no choice. It was Hippo. It's gonna be fine. I'm scared. No! Only 2 people I didn't want. So the question is, would I move Hippo out if I could? Well, no. And I'm here to tell you in this video why that is. So why do I not want the power of a god? Well, I feel like we think of the Animal Crossing series as a life sim series, yes. And if we look at the term life sim, it's life simulation. And in real life, we don't always have power. Like, I cannot choose which neighbor moves out of my apartment building. If my nice neighbor upstairs wants to move out and someone else moves in who randomly gets zoomies at 2 a.m. in the morning and is just clobbering about up there, that's not anything I have any power over. Like, maybe I can choose which neighborhood I move to, though even that usually is very constrained by like real life limitations like money and where your work is, etc. So real life is rife with things that you can't do, whether you wish you could do them or not. As people often say, there are the things that you have power over and the things that you don't have power over. Another way to think about this is the term agency. We don't always have agency in real life, and that's the same in games. And agency is actually a term that is used a lot in video games. It's a psychological term originally. In psychology, agency is a person's ability to initiate and control their actions and the feeling they have of being in charge of their actions. Game designers also use this term, but they often call it player agency. Now, everyone defines player agency in video games a little bit differently, but I just chose a definition that I liked that I found on the internet. Shout out to bluebirdinternational.com. But they say player agency is the level of control and decision-making power that players have within a game. It allows players to feel like they are actively shaping their experience, making choices that have a meaningful impact on the story and gameplay. In gaming, this is closely tied to player control. When players have agency, they are able to exercise that control, deciding how they want to approach each challenge and making meaningful choices that impact the overall outcome of the game. Decision-making allows players to shape the story in a way that is unique to their playthrough. Games that offer real agency give players the freedom to choose their path, and in doing so create a more immersive and engaging experience. Now, as I said, everyone kind of defines it a little differently. I find this definition interesting because it's definitely biased in favor of player agency. But the thing is, player agency isn't an objectively good or bad thing to have in your game. It's also like not like you have it or you don't have it. It's really more of a spectrum that you can design for depending on the type of experience you want someone to have in your game. For example, in a game like The Sims, you're meant to feel like you're playing God. Like, these are little people in your little town and you get to literally build them and then dictate every little action in their lives to your heart's content. You are a micromanager to the extreme, and that's kind of the appeal of a game like that. Animal Crossing, though, as a series, even though it is also a simulation game, is trying to simulate something a little different from a game like The Sims. In Animal Crossing, you're part of the town. You create your own character, and also the characters that can move in and move out of your town or island are pre-built, and they come with their own personalities, their own hobbies and interests, and their own look and vibe. Animal Crossing definitely isn't going for the exact same thing that a game like The Sims is going for. Animal Crossing as a series, at least to me, is all about making you actually feel like you are living this whole other life in this town of dynamic characters. You are not standing apart from that life. Yes, you sometimes have more power than other villagers, being like a mayor or the island representative in New Horizons, but ultimately you're still a resident too. And honestly, to circle back to the question I opened this video with, I don't want to have full control over everything. Even though I hate to say it, don't want to be able to move Hippo or any other villager I hate out at will so easily, because life is full of stuff that happens that isn't always good. You get laid off your job. You have an annoying neighbor move in above you. You might have someone be really rude to you for no reason. These are things that kind of add a sort of dynamic nature to life. You never know what you're gonna get. And yes, that can be a little stressful sometimes, but I think in a game context, that can be really fun because you know it's not real. You can step away from the game at any time. These aren't real people, these aren't real animals. And that gives us a kind of safe, sacred place to roleplay these scenarios that mirror real life while having the safety of knowing it's not actually real. And I say it's not actually real, but that's not to invalidate the emotions that we feel when things happen in Animal Crossing, because those emotions are very real. I felt so upset when Hippo appeared in my campsite, and I knew I had no way to not let him move in. If I'm somehow wrong about this, please let me know, but as far as I know, the first campsite villager you get, you have to move them in, and the game autosaves as soon as you walk in that tent, so you can't just restart your Switch. Believe you me, I wanted to, but I had no choice. Hippo said, "You thought you lost me at the last island a few restarts ago? No, I'm back again." And that just adds a little spice to my experience, even if it does like bug me sometimes when I see his face. As I was looking through some interviews and stuff with Animal Crossing team folks from Nintendo, I found this interview that wasn't that long ago, but it was during the New Leaf era from 2016. And there were a few quotes from that interview that I found really interesting that I think apply to this topic, so I'm going to read them out to you. So this is a 2016 interview on Nintendo.com, and they're talking to the general producer Katsuya Eguchi and Animal Crossing series producer Hisashi Nogami. So the interviewer says, "Over the years, you must have heard lots of stories from players about what their village is like, or what Animal Crossing means to them. Can you think of any examples that stick out for you?" And Hisashi Nogami says, "Something that was notable to me was a user writing a blog. There's a duck called Pate that he or she liked very much, and the character moved out of their town. That user was really sad. My Pate left my village." They kept writing about how sad they were on the blog. Then, eventually, the person recovered, found a new friend, and then started to enjoy village life again. I think the game is something that moves people's emotions. You know, sometimes it's very common that you have fun and you get a sense of accomplishment, but there are also feelings of sadness and of sorrow that the users were able to feel too. Of course it's sad at that moment, but in the end, they were able to process it and go back to enjoying the game. I think that kind of evolution was unexpected for us. It's interesting and unexpected. So I thought this was really interesting that this was the story that stuck out to the series producer, because it kind of shows what I'm getting at here, where sometimes you want to allow space for negative things to happen. It allows for a more complex, rich experience. Even in a game like Animal Crossing that is, you know, one of the first games you think of when you think of a cozy game. I don't personally believe that cozy games can't or shouldn't explore some more difficult emotions too. I feel like there is space, there's a spectrum of coziness, and some of that can allow for games that may trigger some negative emotions sometimes, but it's still part of the overall cozy life feeling vibe. Is life a vibe, y'all? Can I call life a vibe? But hopefully you get what I mean. Like, not to get too cheesy, but you know, life is a roller coaster and you don't always know where the twists and turns are gonna come or when exactly the big drop is gonna hit, but that's kind of what makes it exciting. And I feel like that's kind of what makes Animal Crossing exciting when it comes to these villagers and how we feel about them. There's one other quote from the same interview that I want to read that I also feel like relates to this. This quote is from Katsuya Eguchi, and it's in response to this question from the interviewer. So, which of the characters or different personality types in Animal Crossing are you most like? So the series producer says, for me, it's Bob. The general producer's answer was Rasher. I'm gonna kind of skip over some of what they said, but they were explaining Rasher's personality type, which is cranky, and explaining how Rasher is actually very nice and polite though, and how looks can be deceiving. They go on to say, you know, it's like when kids played in the city, there would always be an old man that would come up and say, don't do that, it's dangerous. It's that kind of scariness. It's not a bad person trying to do a bad thing. It's a person who is trying to teach and guide people towards good. That's the idea behind that personality type. Scary, but in a good way. So yeah, I love that kind of explanation for like the cranky villagers and how they are the way they are. But I also wanted to highlight that because it's again an example of some of the creators behind Animal Crossing acknowledging that they intentionally plant these kinds of interactions in the game and these kinds of potential experiences in the game that could make you feel a little bit like, what's going on at first, but they're doing that to kind of mirror these things that they see in real life that they want to simulate, like an angry old man who actually means well. So I guess my point with all of this is I think I don't necessarily want to be able to control everything when it comes to Animal Crossing. I like that sometimes I don't have control. And I only gave like negative examples of like, you know, someone you hate moving in and such. Or the example in the interview was someone you really love moving out without your control, which by the way happened in the older games, like the very first few games, I believe. You actually had no control, like your favorite villager could just suddenly be gone. And then later on they added the mechanic where you could actually like stop them if you talk to them in time. But that aside, there's also positive ways you can have surprises. For example, I accidentally got confused about the process of how to villager hunt for like a couple of the villagers on my island. Like I think I put a plot down too soon because I thought it wouldn't get autofilled unless I went to the next day or something. I don't know. Whatever. I messed that process up and it did get autofilled. And at first I was like, oh my god, this is terrible. I wanted to go on a villager hunt. I wanted to find someone that I could, through my agency, invite to the island. But it all worked out, y'all, because guess who moved in? Portia! I've never had Portia, and she's not a villager I would have consciously thought of. But because the game effectively forced her on me, I get to enjoy getting to know this lovely new villager who I am loving. And I also want to go back to that quote from the interview where they were talking about, you know, that person's pate moving away and how sad they were, but they eventually kind of moved on, found a new villager to love. The producer commented on that and said it was like, you know, kind of like interesting and unexpected. And I feel like the unexpected part is also what makes these situations so compelling. When it comes to positive things happening, for me, Portia was like an obvious, like as soon as I met her, I was like, wow, I'm obsessed with you. You're like a Dalmatian, you're a diva, and I love you. But there's also the villagers that you kind of unexpectedly end up loving, even though at first meeting or at first glance, you might not be vibing with them. You might even hate them just based on how they look. And I feel like that also is a really special experience. If you've ever had that experience with a villager where you started off kind of being meh on them and then you ended up loving them, let me know down in the comments. For me, I think actually Rasher is someone I really grew to be very fond of on my older island. I also had Benjamin, who I think in the beginning I was extremely like, just like, he's fine, you know, he's just fine. But I grew to absolutely love him, and now he's one of my favorite villagers ever of all time, and I really miss him, and I almost regret restarting just because I want him back, but also I feel like I'll see him again. Like, he's not gone forever, and he's always there in my heart. But yeah, whether it's something that you recognize as instantly positive or it's something that you realize ends up being an overall net positive later, these things can go either way. So whether it's good or bad, I think I just really love the experience of not always being able to say what happens on my island or what happens in my town in the older Animal Crossing games. Let me know how you think. I don't think there's any wrong or right way to feel about this, like whether you feel like you do want all the power and you want to be like an overlord or a god, or if you like less power. I think all of that is valid, and it's interesting hearing how different people like to play this game. I definitely, I guess, land a little more on the side of like wanting less power, and I think that's just because I like the whole simulation of life, like taking that literally. Like I think that's just interesting to me versus like if you're over here and it's like simulating God. Hey, I'm editing this video right now and I realized I wanted to make one more point about the idea of how player agency improves immersion in games. So the original definition that I read out here kind of implies that more player agency equals more immersion. Now, immersion is a whole nother topic, maybe for another day. But if we think of immersion simply as being like very engrossed, absorbed, and engaged in a game and its world and its story, etc., I feel like what we're talking about in this video with regards to kind of how taking away some of the player's control actually increases how lifelike the game feels. I think that's really interesting because I feel like in this case, at least for me, in my opinion and my experience of Animal Crossing, I feel like having less player agency makes the game feel more immersive because it makes it feel more like I'm really living in a real town with real other villagers who can make their own choices for themselves that I cannot determine for them. So I just thought that was interesting and want to share it. Anyway, I'm going to throw it back to the other me. Boop. Now, the other thing to think about here is where should the Animal Crossing series go next when it comes to the topic of player agency and how much control you have over your villagers' lives and who ends up on your island and what they can do and what your island or town is even like. Personally, I would love if in the next game they added a toggle where you could either toggle it on for please prevent any of my villagers moving out without my permission, and then if you toggle it off, it will actually allow villagers to move out without asking for your input and you have no control over it. I think that would be really cool. That's like the best of both worlds, so however people want to play it, they can play it. I also feel like there's good precedence for this in other genres with similar mechanics. Like if you've ever played a game that has the concept of permadeath, where characters can literally die and be gone forever. There are a lot of games that have that mechanic that also let you toggle it on and off, so you can decide like to turn permadeath off and then your characters can never die, which is good for people like me who get super attached to their characters and cannot imagine having to grieve the fictional character's death. Sometimes I am not in the headspace to deal with that, but sometimes I am, and I like having the option. So that's just one idea I have for like a feature they could create in future games. I'm sure this isn't an original idea. I feel like maybe I've heard this voiced elsewhere and stored it in my brain, but I think it sounds like a fantastic option here. In terms of other things, I know many people, including me, want them to bring back a little more of the sassy, mean dialogue. And I think that's related to this topic in the sense that not having all this control over the vibe, right? Like right now, everything feels very samey because the vibe is very like controlled, positive. But if they bring back a lot of the dialogue that's a little more sassy, a little more mean, that's gonna add some dynamics, you know, to the tone. That does mean the game's experience might feel a little more up and down, in the sense that you might have a day where you log in and like, I don't know, maybe all your villagers are a little cranky or something. Not like literally being like cranky personality type, but maybe they're just all being a little bit like, a little bit off. Or you might have days where even the mean villagers on your island are kind of just randomly in a good mood. And I think that would be really fun and it would add a lot of complexity and it would feel more like how people act in real life. And I also think that is also something they could add as a toggle. Y'all, I love the idea of toggles. Just give us all the options, you know what I mean? I mean, that is actually the ultimate agency, not as like the player in the game as the character, but the agency as like the human behind the player, right? To be able to toggle these options on and off and decide how you want to play. That kind of agency I'm all for. But yeah, I feel like they could just be like, I don't know, if they had like a mood system in the game, oh my god. So if they had a mood system where it's like regardless of personality type, they can be in good or bad moods and that affects like kind of how they are. Like maybe even the peppy villagers can be a little off sometimes, but it doesn't mean that they're mean. Maybe they're just like sad in a peppy way. You know what I mean? I feel like that would be really interesting. And that could be something you could toggle on or off. Like maybe it's like you toggle the mood system on or off, and if it's toggled off, the villagers would act more like they do in a game like New Horizons, where they're just kind of always like the positive version of that personality type, I guess. I also like the idea of, again, a toggle to decide whether you want control over the house placement or if you want the villagers to get to decide where they want to live. I think that would be really cool, especially if they had like certain villager personalities maybe gravitate towards like certain landscapes on your island. Like for example, maybe peppy villagers want to live closer to like resident services because they want to be like more in the spotlight because they're more extroverted. I'm not sure. Maybe cranky villagers want to live like on the outskirts of town, and so if you let them choose themselves, they will do that. Or you can still have the option to place it yourself. I think it would be nice to just like have a little bit of both, you know? I feel like Animal Crossing is a series that we've kind of seen them kind of move between these scales of like how much control you have and how much you don't, how dynamic the villagers' personalities are versus how more flat they are. I don't want to say flat because flat sounds like very negative. I still love the villagers in New Horizons, but it is true that they're a little more one note, right? I feel like they've been experimenting between these two aspects, especially New Horizons feels like they kind of like experimented a little bit with how the series has been as a whole. Maybe they now kind of know how to combine and make the best of both worlds and make it somewhere in the middle so that all of us can kind of have what we want. I don't know, maybe that's idealistic, but I mean, it's Nintendo. They have the budget. New Horizons sold really well. Why not? Why not? So yeah, if you have any ideas yourself for features you'd like to see added in the next game in relation to like player control and agency, let me know down in the comments. I'd love to know. And just let me know your thoughts in general on this topic in terms of how player agency relates to any of the Animal Crossing games that you've played, whether you've just played New Horizons or you've played the older games too. I'd love to hear from you. Literally, I had so much fun reading all the comments on the last video I made that was about Animal Crossing. I just really love discussions in this community. And I really love hearing all the different ways that people play these games. I just feel like it just reminds me how much there is to love about these games. And I love that there's so much to talk about, and like critique is cool, critique is fun. I feel like when I analyze a game like this and I'm critiquing certain aspects, it's like a way of me showing love to the game, you know? Because like I love talking about the things that I love. So if you're like me, sound off in the comments. And I think that's all I have to say. If you enjoyed this video, that was kind of like a very casual design chat about Animal Crossing in terms of like the gameplay design. You might also enjoy this other video I made a couple weeks ago where I talked about the storytelling in Animal Crossing, so feel free to check that out. If you love Animal Crossing and you would like to see someone streaming Animal Crossing, I do stream it. I'm streaming around twice a week on Twitch and YouTube. Feel free to check me out. I also make videos here on YouTube about cozy games in general. So I'm gonna let you go because I trapped you here in my apartment with me, and that's very rude. So you can leave now. You can go. Have a safe trip home. Yeah. Sorry, that was a kind of weird way to end this. Okay, bye!